I can print PLA and ABS. It's just settings, but I can print them at the same time. Now let's check out this. How's it going? Anthony Fro here, Create Sci-Fi. This is the second video in our series about the FlashForge USA Creator Max. So they're sponsoring these videos, so it's very exciting to finally get into 3D printing on this channel. Now, if you watch the unboxing video, this is the second in that series. So in this, the goal was to really just learn about the printer and to sort of get into the aspects of the dual extrusion, right? It's a dual extruder printer. And for me, you know, just to sort of push myself and to see what sorts of things I can do with this and what I need to learn and just sort of, you know, get in there. So the first thing was to try different prints, right? So, you know, we kicked it off with the Benchy, right? And that just went out of the gate, no problem, easy. So then, you know, I had to step it up, go to the next level. Based on that, you know, I was sort of just in Thingiverse, which most people know about now, but if you don't, Thingiverse is a really cool hub where people upload models that you can share, right? They're public domain. And that's where you get a lot of these models that you see, like little doodads for your desk and even like, you know, practical, neat kind of things, right? So for me, I couldn't resist. So my first real successful print was this Buddha Fett, right? So this printed no problem, right? So we're off to the races. In the mail, I got more filament, right? So I just had the red filament is the one that came with it, right? This is the FlashForge filament, and this is PLA, right? So the major filaments are PLA and ABS. So then I got some ABS, and I wanted to do some tests to see which one I preferred or which properties were better for which applications, if you know what I mean. So there's lots of variables, right? So the flash print slicer is very easy to use, and I'll link to my first video if you haven't seen that. I go into detail on that. And then once you slice the model, you know, there's temperature settings of the plastic, temperature settings of your bed, speed, right? And all these different factors. And of course, with all these factors, you know, you're gonna have some sort of hurdles to overcome, especially like if you're a novice like me. So that takes me to this box, right? So printing this is Create Sci-Fi. You know, we're gonna make blasters. So, you know, first attempts at blasters. And then I see this all the time on YouTube, and I was able to make my own. So, you know, the machine is solid, but there's a lot of things where I was like, oh, I want a finer, faster print. I did a setting. That setting didn't work. And then I ran into this one thing that was really fascinating was, you know, I kept not getting my prints. They were not sticking to the bed and they were curling up. And then I realized, after doing more research, you know, I live in Los Angeles. It's always pretty much the same temperature, but these last couple weeks, it's been really rainy and cold at night. Now, I'm an old school like video editor, and back in the day, it'd be like you do your work all day, and then at night you'd go to sleep and you'd let it render for like 10 hours, right? So I have that mentality. So what I was doing is messing around with all my prints, and then I would let it run at night, and I was having print failures, and it turns out it was because the weather was like a little too cold, so I had to adjust the heat bed. And so you realize it's all things like that are part of printing, right? So doing some more tests, you know, I had success with these. So now I have the different filament, right? So this is black. This is from Matter Hackers, right? Really cool filament company. Yeah, so that without a hitch. And I find with these big bases, sticks no problem. So then I wanted to check out the dual extruder, right? Okay, so the thing with that is, you know, read all the instructions, and it's saying because it's going from one color to another, you know, it creates this wall in order to sort of clean out the nozzle when it goes to the next. But, you know, I'm trying things out. I'm like, well, you know, what happens if you don't put up the wall? And in this case, I should have listened to the instructions, right? So you see here that. So then I did it with the wall, and of course that worked, right? So this was cool. So I was able to print these both at the same time. The wall worked, you know, that's the way to do it. These are the Han Solo dice. So which brings me to the next thing, the Raft and the Brim, right? So the Raft is, it creates like a mush, like a bed on there, and then it builds the print on there. That uses a lot of material, and I think that's not ideal, especially for what I want to do, because I want like that flat surface. So then started experimenting with the Brim, and then the Brim, I think is the way to go, and I think the Raft is for extreme cases that I haven't experienced yet. But you can see here, like in the one that failed on me, one of the ones, where is it? Okay, so actually this was not a failure. So this was the Raft. This is actually the ABS, and that was the Raft on this test part, and then that just comes off, and that created like a nice bed, and we got a good print out of that, right? So the next thing I did is I just went ahead and printed the test pieces that come with the FlashForge, right? And that just came out just really nice. But again, with this material, it was like it was a heat setting on my part, where in this case the Raft is really stuck on there, right? So again, it's a lot of like trial and error. Like what I was doing initially was printing off of the card, because I found that easier. But eventually, just as I'm learning this, I had to bring the computer in, and I would get like little prints, you know, like these dice, but like small, right? And I would try like 5 degrees difference, you know, up or down, wall or brim, and you really need to do that. It's just part of the process. And then there's so much information that it can kind of get overwhelming, because, you know, it's like everybody's answering your questions, but still it's not exactly solving it for you. But the good news is, like, this is a really solid, reliable machine, right? So it was never, the only time I had like machine problems was, you know, you see here this failed print, and that failed because I had the spool not on correctly, and it was kind of hitting against the wall, and it just stopped spinning. You know, things like that happen. Or in one case, I was doing a print, and as the spool was unwinding, you know, because it has that energy of being wound, it just kind of popped off. That got all met. So, you know, these things happen. So you really need to just check in once in a while if it's like a 5 or 6 hour print. So then, before we get into ABS and really cool dual extrusion, of course, like, I wanted to make a blaster. This is Create Sci-Fi, right? So I started experimenting and going on Thingiverse and finding these cool blaster models. And, you know, you have different pieces, you know, just getting everything to work. It's definitely a craft, right? It's a skill. You get better at it. So what I found was getting these to all work perfectly it's a lot of tweaking and experimenting. And then, like, this is a perfect example. Like, finally I realized I had, like, this was me like the second day, right? And then I realized, like, yeah, I have a lot more work to do, right? So that looks like, oh, that's pretty cool, that's a blaster, but no. So you see this side, I had to learn, like, this is on the bed, this needs supports. Oh, these supports were not the right supports, like a Raft. But this is, I think, a perfect example of, like, how close you can come, and then, no, you got up. You got to work on it, right? So Back to the drawing board. So now let's talk about the ABS, right? So I finally got the ABS in, and I think, you know, PLA is sort of the most recommended material, and it's the sturdiest and easiest and most reliable. But the ABS for prop making, this, you know, this is just on video, but it's like, if you feel this and you feel this, like this is like plastic, and this feels like a raw model piece from like a model kit, if that makes sense. So I think for me, the PLA is like if I'm doing, you know, Boba Fett, right? Or I did like this gnome from Proto Pasta, another cool filament company, right? So that sort of thing. Or maybe, you know, I'm wanting to get a lot into, like, you know, need a tool, make a tool, like creating parts. Like if you're tinkering in your head and you want to, you have an idea of something you want to invent, or, you know what I mean, or some solution to a problem you have, I'll do that in that plastic. Or, you know, if I'm doing the dice, or, you know, things like that, I will use that. But if I'm gonna make a blaster for a movie or like a hand prop, it's gonna be with this material. Now I have, where is it, some sandpaper here, and you hear that? You know, just when you sand that and you feel that, that's like, that feels like something's happening. I'm making a prop. This stuff, you know, you can sand it and fill it, and it's just, it's fine, but it's a tactile thing, right? When you feel this, it's like, oh, okay, this is a prop. This is, you know, gadgets and artwork and tinkering, right? So I get the ABS, right? So I got the ABS. So what's really remarkable about this printer is a dual extruder, and then I can print PLA and ABS. It's just settings, but I can print them at the same time. Now let's check out this. That's remarkable. Now this printed at the same time. Like I said, I'm new to this, but the fact that these two different materials that take two different heat settings to work properly, right? So one nozzle's at like 220, one's at 200. It's just really cool. And you see, you know, the time lapse of this, it printed, you know, flawlessly. Now, again, I had the Raft issue at the bottom where it was sticking, I think, because of the two different materials. But, you know, I haven't got into the sort of after work with these yet. But for this, I was so amazed by this, I wanted to go ahead. And I just sanded the bottom, and that was fine. So that's just amazing. All right, so wanting to take it to the next level, all I do on Create Sci-Fi is, it's never, here's a master class in whatever it is I'm doing. If I'm kit bashing, if I'm making costumes, if I'm making props, if I'm making a web series or short film, it's always about, okay, we want to make these sci-fi productions. Here's all these components. What do I need to do this myself, right? DIY. So the same thing with this. So I wanted to create my own like kit bash blasters, and I have like a concept, but Fusion 360 is probably the way to go, or like Blender. But again, that's like a big learning curve, right? So, I mean, I've been through this before with like effect software and things like that, where, you know, to be really good at it would probably take a year. And then when you're tinkering in the beginning, it's probably, I don't know, like a couple months, or, you know, to do one simple task that once you learn it will take you 5 minutes, will probably initially take you 6 hours to learn, right? So this brings me to Tinkercad. So Tinkercad is a cool, you know, online program, and it achieved what I needed for now, which it allowed me to do basic things that I had in my mind, but I was able to do it within, you know, minutes, right? So the first thing I did is I found this tutorial. So I took the logo of Create Sci-Fi. Then you go here to this site where for free, it changes it to a vector image. So then you have that vector image, which that's cool, because before you would have had to go into Illustrator and do that. So I have this vector. Then I can bring it into Tinkercad, and then within there, I can manipulate it and turn it into a model and export it, and then bring it into my flash print. And then from there, I can prep it for print, create the G file, and then make this. Now, this was really cool for a lot of reasons, right? The process of figuring out how to do this was like, oh, now I can use Tinkercad to create my, you know, kit bash blasters and, you know, whatever hand props I wanted to do. I went in there and started doing, building a blaster. So now this was the sort of the next level of like, okay, now I got to learn. So with the blaster, many failures, right? So it's big, it almost takes up the whole bed. You got to slice it. And then it was heating too fast, and it was curling from the bed. So I had to work on adhering things to the bed. So then once you kind of go to the next level, you know, this has a heated surface, which is great for sticking down. But then also, you know, things like using a little bit of a glue stick, that helps it to set better. You know, and then I just kept getting these failures. And then when I got the ABS in, I was very excited, because ultimately that's what I want to print these in, right? So that was not working, right? But the machine is solid, right? It was like I was going to the next level where, yeah, sure, I can just hit one button and make this, because whoever built this model, you know, they figured it out. This is pretty, you know, it's a flat surface, round. All these ones that print really well, what they have in common is they have a base, and then they sort of come up to a point, right? So you don't need a lot of support material. So in trying to do the blaster, that's when I really, you know, had to spend a lot of time really learning the settings. And what I realized was it's just small degrees, right? And because there's a combination of 4 to 5 things between the heat and then, you know, the first layer and all these things, that it took me a while to dial in. But then once it's dialed in, now this I don't have a time lapse on because it took me like, you know, a few tries, but finally I had success, right? This is 4 pieces, so then I have to do the other piece and then the handle, right? But if you could see that, I mean, look at that knurling. And I was able to bash this and do all this customized work just in Tinkercad. Like, I made that scope myself. The model I kit bashed from like another model that I found online. I mean, yeah, right? Success. So that's why I want to end this here, right? The FlashForge USA Creator Max. Wow, dual extruder printer, easy to use. So happy with, you know, where we're heading with this. So now in the next video, I'm going to go into Tinkercad and I'm going to kit bash a 3D model blaster. I want to do something more like 70s, more stylized. I'm going to print it in the ABS, right? So, so exciting. As always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Love to read the comments. And like I said, especially as I'm learning this, what's been really great in the comments is people have been requesting what they want to see. And then people have been helping me that already have more experience than me. I've gotten a lot of great comments on helping me solve some problems. So that's been really fun. Well, check out the merch shop. We got the shirts, we got the hats, buying that really helps the channel. There's links for this printer in the description below where you can learn more about it, and you can purchase one if you want. There's also a product link. And remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi.